I think they're on our tail, Bill said, breathing heavily. Nah, probably not, they won't catch up so quickly, Dave replied, also nervously looking back. But the forest was ordinary, evening-like, and no one was running behind them. Man, just think about it, so much money, Bill said, literally gasping for air. He was so worn out that he couldn't finish his sentence in one go, so after a few breaths, he continued. So much money we have, do you realize it's worth it? Worth ditching that fat bastard, and you were so scared. Now we'll live like never before. Like never before, but badly, Dave responded, darkly. Why? What if they find us? Are you stupid? I think, first of all, he doesn't even know yet. Bill looked at his watch on his wrist. He'll find out, at best, in about 2 hours. Then he'll run to the apartment where I used to live, checking with friends and acquaintances, but forget it. A day's passed. In this day, we'll get to where we need to, lay low, drink some clear stuff, stare at the ceiling, and in a bit, we'll head straight for the border to spend the money, without looking back. Damn, I'm still nervous, though. What if they find us? I mean, you know, what if we blow our cover? I don't know, staying in the forest for so long. It's not the forest, damn it, Dave, it's not the forest, it's an abandoned village with 40 houses, where no one's lived for years. I set up a place in one of those houses to lay low. What if someone came while you were gone? Not likely, Bill answered confidently, chopping off a huge branch from a tree that was blocking their way through the bushes. Not likely anyone's been there, and here's why. Look, when I decided to screw over our boss, I thought about it for a long time and observed everything, and I picked this village, but at first, I had a different plan. Initially, I thought about grabbing the money and running across the border right away, abroad, but then I thought that would bring consequences. Our boss, he's not exactly poor, I'm sure he'll find out. There are cameras here, there are cameras there, he's been spotted, and maybe they won't let him through customs, plus again, questions about where all this money came from. Bill hopped, his bag was full of money, the bill's satisfying crunch filled his ears, giving him back some of the strength he'd lost. You know, it's hard to explain where I got all this money, they'll stop me, and, basically, they might arrest me. I thought for a long time about which border to cross to escape our boss's wrath, but I came to the conclusion that there's no better idea than to lay low right under his nose. And then I miraculously saw this village's name on the map, and the brilliant thought hit me that I don't actually have to run anywhere. I got there and found, among the crooked houses, the most vile, the most sketchy one, and I realized there was potential. Inside, I obviously made it livable, but from the outside, it looked like a regular ruin. Inside, I didn't want to live, so I changed everything, insulated it as best as I could, made a stock of food, water, and everything else. And the most important thing, Bill raised his finger. They won't find me, 100% info, or rather, they won't find us. I'd try to sneak across the border, Dave said hesitantly. You won't make it, you understand, we're hauling non-cash stuff, and look, while you're scattering the money all over the map, time won't pass, and by the time you get to the border, they'll have already caught you 100 times. Well, I think with that much cash, there could be a way to cross illegally. Illegally, buddy, they'd slap you and take your bag, and that's the end of it. So no, we need to wait it out here. Don't you feel bad about it? Dave asked unexpectedly. Of course I feel bad, but what can I take from her? She has nothing, and again, she doesn't know anything. I can imagine how our boss is freaking out right now. I can imagine how he's calling his buddies, his thugs, and everyone else, offering to pay anyone who tells him where we are. Not yet, it's too early, he hasn't gotten there yet. Nah, Dave looked at his watch, he probably already knows. Maybe you're right, but either way, they'll be looking for us all over the city, and we'll have alerts posted on every block. Hey, Bill, have you ever wondered where he gets all that money? I have. And? Probably a habit. Well, that's how I see it. I don't get it, Dave asked, lighting a cigarette. Well, look, I used to work as a carpenter for a company, and I worked as a regular guy, let's say, getting a little bit. Private clients were always breaking things, and well, I wasn't exactly a big shot, and I was greedy. So, I was getting, for example, 30,000 rubles, and somehow I lived. But then when I came to our boss, he immediately gave me 50, and as you can imagine, that wasn't enough. I think the more a person has, the more they need. Understand? Back then, you ate sausage for 300 rubles, now you're eating it for 500. It's the same sausage, but it costs more. Listen, how did you, well, get into the business? Oh, Bill laughed. Well, first I was a worker, as you can imagine, also working, making cabinets, furniture, sawing boards, and all that. And then it just happened that I was buying a car, and I needed the money, so I started working day and night, and that's when it all started. My boss came to me and said, "You're a good guy, we'll pay you more, but we're going to do something for me." I won't go into what we did, because we did it many times and in different ways. And then it happened that he got drunk in the office, went down to the workshop, and in a drunken stupor told me how he was messing around to avoid taxes, how he was screwing over the shareholders, what he did and how, and just flat out told me everything. Yeah, we'd been talking before, and I guess he started trusting me or something like that, and then... Well, in the morning, he realized he'd blurted everything out and decided, so to speak, to keep me close. That's how I ended up as the right-hand man and the left leg. And so, does he have a lot of screw-ups behind him? Yeah, you know, it's like, he sort of considered the company to be not his, and that there was nothing there for him, practically treated it like his own property. And he was right. He had his mother, father, wife, kids, everyone working efficiently. I should have snitched on him, I think, his shareholders would have buried him. But no, that's the whole point, they're gonna tear him apart anyway. He talked about how they suspect something, and they started suspecting when they were buying equipment. You better tell me, where did you take his money? Oh, well, there's really nothing to tell. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't even know there was money there. But here's how things usually went. He'd call, saying, "Go here, pick something up and bring it." You know, it was usually some suitcases. I'd just drive to the address, say who I was with, they'd give me 1 or 2 packages, I'd throw them on the seat and take them. They usually told me, though not always, be careful, there are documents or something like that, say hi to the boss for me. I didn't really think much about what was inside. Well, yeah, and it was money, the kind they made with their partners off the books, and that's how they were picking the pockets of both the shareholders and the company, you could say. That's why I decided to punish him, so to speak, to play on the robbed. You see, I found out, oh, what amazing schemes. These sums of money, you understand, they weren't just for nothing. Anyway, our corporation received a large order through our boss's channels to equip a building. They were opening offices, needed tables, chairs, kitchens, people had to go there, gather it all, and install it. Basically, a ton of money had to be spent. For example, a table cost not 10,000, but 20, and yet in our company's documents it showed 10. You see what kind of sweating scheme they pulled off. And they were planning to rip off the clients for the rest. The building was huge, and the boss said that if they closed the deal now, we'd need to get out of the business somehow and run. That's when I decided, yeah, it's time to get out of the business, but for me, or rather for us. And, basically, I talked you into it, and now we're headed through the forest, to the abandoned village. A scheme, Dave said, laughing and raising his finger, just like his buddy did a moment ago. The very one, Bill said, and the ground beneath them seemed to boil, becoming soft and spongy. In an instant, it gave way on its own, and Bill and Dave, losing their footing, fell down into the darkness. A cramp ran through his body, making his dirt-covered body jerk and spit out leaves and a clump of dirt, which Dave, screaming, swallowed midair. It was cold and painful, and strangely, it was quiet and unusual. He lay on his back and looked up. Above him were trees, clear sky, evening, and it seemed like, if he just stood up, jumped 2 meters, he'd grab the edge. But there was a but. Where am I? Dave thought, trying to get up, and realized that his left leg was positioned very strangely and unnaturally, more to the left than his left. There was no pain yet, but it wasn't there yet, maybe it would come. He looked at his treacherous leg, the one that betrayed him, his Achilles heel. He wanted to scream, howl, and cry because he had fallen into some kind of hole. Because, damn it, he had fallen and broken his leg while Bill, his so-called buddy, probably ran off somewhere. He quickly looked around and, to his surprise, discovered his buddy, and he really had run off from Dave, though to the afterlife. Not knowing what to do or how to react, Dave made a strange sound, a mix between surprised grunting and a pitiful sob. "How the hell did you die?" he asked, sitting on his backside and kicking his buddy's head with his healthy leg. "Why'd you collapse, you donkey? Why'd you leave me hanging, you idiot?" He kicked the dead body and saw the cause of Bill's death. A broken head, with a puddle already forming beneath it. "How did you manage to die, you animal, by falling on the ground?" he asked, and only then did it occur to him that they weren't in a hole. He was sitting on his backside on a concrete floor, and his voice echoed. "Hey!" he shouted. "Hey!" echoed back, reverberating off the walls countless times. Dave pulled out a flashlight from the side pocket of his backpack, lit it, and looked around. It was a corridor. Definitely a corridor, and a corridor that, I should say, was low but very long. The beam of the flashlight didn't reach either end from any side. The floor was concrete, and the walls too. Next to them, there were shavings wrapped in peeling paint that had been coming off the wall for a long time. And only the inscription, 7-4, written in white paint and partially half-faded, raised more questions than answers. We've fallen somewhere. But where, and how do we get out now? Dave thought, looking at the walls. And the answer to the question was right there. The ceilings were low, and there were some iron structures on the walls holding thick cables, snaking off into the darkness. There was no doubt that if he threw his body onto that structure, he could easily reach even that root over there. Dave swallowed the lump in his throat. But the problem was that his leg was broken. But Dave knew that he wasn't going to climb somewhere. He was going to try and beg himself to crawl up with one leg, trying to get out. After all, where do these corridors lead? How far? Dave didn't know and didn't want to know. He knew that if he crawled away from the pit, things might get worse. What if there's another pit, and he falls deeper and, like Bill, cracks his skull? Anything could happen, and Dave began his rescue attempt as quickly as possible. He needed to go up, but money. The backpack on Bill's dead body was incredibly tempting. There was so much money there that if he just got out of this hole and made it to the city, he'd be a king. But the problem was, Dave wasn't sure he could even get out by himself. Let alone do it with the backpack. He took the backpack off his shoulders, rummaged through it, but of course, there were no medicines. His backpack was filled with food and water, but the medicine was at their final destination. So every minute of sitting on the concrete was taking away the most precious thing he had. Strength, spirit, and the ability to escape. So he had to try. "Hey!" Dave shouted again, either from frustration or annoyance. And he froze. There was no echo. "Hey!" He repeated, and again, no echo answered. And he understood one very simple truth. There was no echo. Someone was just repeating it. Not wanting to figure out who could be shouting in the underground tunnels, he, forgetting the pain, fell onto his stomach and crawled down the corridor. After crawling about 30 meters, he found a ventilation shaft box, in which his body fit perfectly. Excellent, he thought, crawling in, hiding. Watching the lit spot where Bill's dead body lay, wondering what would happen next. He literally felt that he wasn't alone here. He sat for quite a while, feeling at least an hour had passed, and thought that maybe he had just shouted in the wrong direction. What if it's just from the other side? After all, this is nonsense. He started making up answers to his questions. Why did the echo behave so strangely? And he was about to climb out and do something truly useful, when suddenly, from the darkness of the corridor, he heard, "Hey!" And the "hey" sounded like his own voice calling him from the darkness. His mind refused to believe it, because what kind of absurdity was this? But the second "hey," which was louder than the first, immediately convinced him that it wasn't just his imagination. So Dave decided to stay hidden and stared even more intently at the little patch of light. After a few minutes, he heard footsteps, quite human. They calmly reached the spot of light, and it entered. A humanoid monster, dressed in ragged clothes and wearing boots. It was hard to say whether it was human or something else. Its eyes were huge, as big as fists, and looking into its pupils was terrifying. It seemed like the whole eye was made of it. The nose was tiny, almost microscopic, and its mouth resembled a toothy O. The creature came out slowly, listening and, seemingly, sniffing with its tiny nose. "Hey!" it shouted again, staring intently in the direction where Dave was hiding. Dave held his breath and continued to watch it. Its arms were thin like matches, fingers long like a pianist's, and the nails were, ugh. Dave felt a bit sick. Something like that could happen to nails if a person never trimmed them. And this creature's nails were curled, like hooks. But they were nails, human nails. It approached the body, examined it, sniffed, and, apparently thinking that if there was a second one, it had most likely fled. It approached Bill. It lifted him with one hand, which seemed impossible, but then something even more unbelievable happened. Bill, who had been dead, but apparently not entirely, suddenly groaned and let out a faint squeak. And Dave realized how deeply he had underestimated the situation. The creature seemed to be frightened by this and, pulling Bill to the wall, slammed his head against it several times. After that, Bill's body started twitching convulsively, and he gasped, kicking his legs without touching the floor. The creature, completely ignoring Dave, opened Bill's backpack, saw that there was no food, then pulled it off Bill and carried it away into the darkness. Dave sat there for a long time, shitting himself, trying to process what he had just seen. What he saw had a very serious impact on him. Too serious. And the darkness shook his mind, after which his sanity was most likely not intact. He was alive, and I kicked him. The heart. I should have listened to my heart. Dave thought, listening to the silence that surrounded him. The foot. And then this. This isn't death, it's a nightmare. No one should die like this, in the dark. No one deserves to be killed by this strange creature, which probably no one has even seen, especially against the wall. Like a rabid dog. Dave's eyes filled with tears. Apparently, his mind was slowly leaving him with each extra minute spent here. Though before, he hadn't noticed such feelings in himself, and he considered himself a rock. But now he was crying like a girl. Against the wall, with his head. He thought, recalling the crunch and the moan Bill made. And Dave spent too much time on this process. He came to his senses when the bright and clear patch of light turned into a small corner of twilight. But not yet complete darkness. And then Dave realized that he had to escape. Because if he didn't leave, that thing would definitely come for him. And the fact that it was running things around here, he didn't doubt for a second. He crawled out of his hiding place. Listened. Crunch, crunch. It was pebbles on the concrete under his body. Crunch, crunch. Listen. And so, until he crawled to the place where they landed. Well, Dave, it's time to feel like a star, he thought, trying to get up, and he felt it. To say Dave wasn't a softy would be wrong. He considered himself a strong-willed person with character. But when sparks and stars flew from his ass and eyes, and the corridor almost lit up, he took a deep breath and pressed himself against a metal structure with cables, nearly losing consciousness. And this was just the beginning. He thought, imagining how he'd grab that root and pull himself up, and the most terrifying part would begin. Pulling himself up. The pain was going to be excruciating. Though he'd find out. He would have the honor of going through this himself. Dave hung by his hands, testing the strength of the structure. It turned out to be solid and wide enough. So he lay on it, threw his leg over, and, as it seemed, he even lost consciousness for a second from the pain, but he managed to pull himself up. He couldn't leave such a cool guy in this hole. He thought, slowly getting up on one leg, and sweat was pouring from him. His back, head, stomach, even his tongue was sweating. But Dave loved life too much to just die peacefully. If he was going to go, he could at least wait for that creature. 1, 2, smash your head against the wall, and hello, Saint Apostle. I was sinful. Dave tried to convince himself, and at the same time, make himself laugh. After all, in the most nightmarish situation, if you smile, life gets a little easier. Dave climbed onto the structure, grabbed the root with his hands, pulled himself up, realized it would hold his weight, and then lowered himself back down, allowing himself to catch his breath. Come on, last push, pull yourself up, then crawl away and you can sleep. The weather's warm, you won't be pissing blood in the morning. Come on, you gotta get to the people somehow, he thought, pulling himself up with his hands. Dave, throwing his healthy leg over, thought one simple and creepy thought. If he passed out for even a second, he had every chance of falling down and cracking his head like Bill. And then, thud thud, and they'd eat him. Dave was lucky, like a drowned man. He pulled himself up, biting the earth in anger, snot flying out of his nose, and he was covered in sweat, almost like a horse in foam, but alive. And the most important thing, as they say, the one who does nothing is already dead. And Dave didn't want to die, because he had a dream, a goal, and some desires. Crawling on his stomach through the forest, Dave wanted only one thing, to eat some ice cream. A big, cold, sweet brick with chocolate crumbs would be just right. And a drink too, he thought, pushing through the bushes. If they put a cup of water and a cup of ice cream in front of him, what would he choose, he wondered. Probably ice cream, he thought, crawling, thinking silly thoughts, and somewhere deep inside his soul, rejoicing, and without realizing it, he passed out. But now, it was okay. It's getting dark, Tony, already. We've been delayed. When the hunt doesn't go well, we should have left. Right, Dad, but who knew it would be like this? We had to try. Try, his father mumbled, looking ahead. The loopers have been more active lately. They say, this morning, the Samilovs had their goat stolen. Samilova, Dad, you know, there's no trust in her, she probably made it all up. Maybe she did, but I was in Katovka and saw one. Really? Yeah, sitting, peeking out of a hole, staring with those huge eyes. I thought about shooting him once, but, the ammo's not cheap, and it costs a lot. I spat, and kept going. Dad, listen, what's this under our feet? Where did these loopers come from? If I tell anyone in town, they'll just spin their finger by their temple and say I'm crazy. They'll be the crazy ones when a looper grabs them by the balls, the father chuckled. As for what's under our feet, no one knows. It seems like they were studying some kind of disease or keeping some terrible diseases. Then they shut everything down, and some of the developments were destroyed improperly or something like that, and that's how they became the loopers. They say they were people once, people who liked to stick their heads into places where a dog wouldn't put its tail. And something happened to them, that's what they say. They say they found this disease, got infected with it, fell to the bottom of these catacombs, and lost their minds, turning into this. The bottom? Yeah, the father replied, pulling a branch aside. They say there's something like a pit where all the filth was dumped, and supposedly in this kalaka, the loopers appear. But I don't think so. What do you think? It's a place from the devil, I'm telling you. No disease will distort a person like that, just look at them. They're all cowardly, one after another, sly, fearful, and as treacherous as devils. And again, I think, whatever disease you put in a person, well, with those eyes, if they grow, they'll just die. You can't mutate like that and not die, and I'm indirectly sure there's something wrong with this place, it's just the place itself. Look, near Katovka, there used to be this village, Early, I think you've heard of it. Every day, devils would come for moonshine, or someone would get possessed, and they used to say that at the cemetery, you couldn't walk at night, or the dead relatives would tear you apart. During the day, you'd cry for them, saying they were gone, and at night, they'd cry about you, that they had no one, and they had nothing to eat. So, it all started with them, when they began building these catacombs. People came to them, measuring and listening to something, apparently, they found something. There was also a woman, half crazy, who said these people might release the Antichrist. You know, in some ways, she was right. That's when the construction began, and problems started, everywhere. People began seeing ghosts, or some creepy things. My father, meaning your grandfather, said he saw a black lamb in the middle of the field, but it was big, he said, as big as 2 barrels. So think about it, was it a lamb or something else? And in general, strange things began happening in our area. People became psychotic, twitchy. It seemed like nothing had happened, but everyone seemed to be on edge. And the early village and the forest village, which no longer exists today, got the worst of it. The dead would come to visit, or the smoke would moan, or the leshy would strangle someone. Just mysticism, son. There was even a rumor that they built this thing over a strange fault, and supposedly they studied it. They studied that it's inhabited in this fault. Like underground dwellers? Well, something like that, said the father, lighting a cigarette. Like another branch of development, and these loopers, they're from there. Just look at those eyes, you can't even call them dumb. If they were humans, they'd at least talk. And these, damn them, And again. Not only loopers lived there, there's something else that licked its way out of these catacombs. Something that made them come out. You heard how the loopers howl, right? It's terrifying, like they're being killed. Oh yeah, I've heard it once. Heard it. There you go, and something else is crawling around, and it's eating the loopers. And, as Mike said, an evil spirit came out from there. Look, there are even cultists, devil worshippers, and witnesses of all sorts of nonsense. They're all here. They're all coming here as if it's smeared with honey. What are they doing here? Why don't the loopers touch them? Are they scared? Don't they want to, or don't they allow them? Questions, son, questions. But Mike said, an evil spirit came out, it won't let the dead rest, and stirs up all the filth. And as for those catacombs, no one knows anything there. I don't even know if anyone's come back from there alive, except for these devils, worshippers. And you've guided them. I've guided them. The guys came, asked to show the entrance. Well, what's there to show? They're paying so much. Look, I took them to the lies, and here's the entrance for you. It's such a pit, you can only go in. Do you think they're alive? No, of course not, although. Well, yeah, said the son, remembering Nick. Nick, he's gone, was, and came back, but it's not Nick anymore, said the father, cutting him off. His mother showed me what he's drawing. There are terrifying portraits, when I saw them, that's it, motherfucker. A chill ran through me. And Nick himself, look at him. Quiet, mysterious, thinking about something, sometimes laughing. What did he see there? Look, said the son, and they both froze. A new pit, the father stated. The cursed catacombs reveal more secrets with each passing day for unsuspecting travelers. Let's take a look, the son asked, lighting the flashlight and shining it down. Nothing unusual, except the blood on the backpack. Is there anything? Yes, the backpack. The father approached and looked down. Let's go, there's a wall covered in blood, looks like a looper killed someone. Maybe we should check what's in the backpack. Do you need it, son? What can you find there? A kettle and a couple of sweaters? Socks and someone's underwear? Son, you don't need it, and there's no rope. You could go down and never come back. The catacombs are like that, stick your finger in, and they'll bite it off up to your shoulder. Well, maybe there's something valuable? Money, father, there's none, let's at least not turn down some freebies. Maybe we'll find something valuable and sell it in the village. Alright, fine, damn it, you convinced me, he said, and the young man, without waiting for his father's reply, was already down, shining the flashlight. The atmosphere in the tunnel was oppressive, the guy noted immediately. The walls started to press on him. It seemed like spending more than an hour in such a place could drive a person mad. Though, why did it seem that way? There's plenty of evidence to suggest you shouldn't stay down there for more than an hour. The air seemed to be filled with some kind of aura. As if something here changes people. But the young man wasn't going to worry, because in his excitement, he almost flew back up, completely ignoring the blood. He showed his father what he found. The father gripped his rifle tighter. "Dad, this is bad, son. It's not good that we even looked at it. This is going to haunt us." "Oh, how it will haunt us. Especially with money like that. It's not just for nothing. And it has power too. They'll come after it. I know it and can feel it. But we shouldn't leave it behind?" the young man asked, holding a bundle of money. "Don't leave it," the father replied. And the young man took off his backpack. "Why? What do I need it for, father? Look at how much is here. It's easier to carry. I didn't think money would weigh this much." "Yeah, and their consequences are just as heavy," the father said, regularly looking around. And the young man, dropping his backpack, continued on with his father. "That is, they're simply gone," said the fat, bald man in the leather chair. He was in a luxurious office, with redwood everywhere, natural leather, moldings, and gilding. But there was one hitch. His eyes were red with anger, and they twitched periodically. The fat man looked like an enraged pit bull in every way, from his fat cheeks, from which saliva almost flowed, to his bloodshot eyes from rage. "Well, not exactly gone. There's a car by the forest. We found them through the cameras along the road. And then they disappeared." "Disappeared?" "Well, the cars by the forest. They could have gone anywhere." "William," the man hissed. "What? Don't you have any brains, just margarine?" "Colonel Grace, well, you said, if we found anything, to report to you right away. So I'm telling you, we've found them." "William, you're just... You should already be in that forest. You should be crawling through it, asking even the hedgehogs where those two idiots are. Do you understand? Get your people. Mine. Anyone. Buy whatever you want and march into the forest. Find them. And don't come back without them." "But, I'm already 47, Colonel." 47, William. Why aren't you in the forest yet? Go and beat them up. William. It'll take a week, William. A month. Even 6 months. Find me those two guys. Dead or alive. What do we do with them once we find them? Kill them, Grace answered, becoming reminiscent of a vampire with a terrible hangover from burnt blood. William left, gloomy as a cloud. And he closed the door politely and carefully. Although he felt like kicking it, so it fell off the hinges. William was really upset by such treatment of himself. What, is he an animal? What really pissed him off was the condescending tone. Especially in this situation. William had heard plenty about Colonel Grace's misdeeds. And in a hungry year, at least take him on, challenge him. So that the dear shareholders, God forbid, don't find out about his misdeeds. And he certainly has things to tell. After all, he's still the deputy. And everything seemed fine. Money makes more money. But today, unexpectedly for himself, William is an idiot. Bald bastard, you're going to get it from me. William thought, walking up the stairs. You'll go to prison, and I'll find the money without you, buddy, he thought, walking and remembering a lovely saying. My tongue is my enemy. But whatever happens, William was planning to personally search for those money grabbers, take his money from their pockets, and personally shoot them in the forest. A team isn't needed for this. This is something you have to do yourself. William belonged to the kind of people who had as much kindness and compassion as a hungry crocodile. When his father raised him, he always said, "Don't think about others. Think about yourself. Other people's problems are their problems. Live your life and set it up." And he always followed this advice because it was the truth. He lived for himself and didn't get in the way of others living. He set up honest people as best as he could, earning himself a better position or a salary increase. He used to be an ordinary worker in a workshop, but after being seen a few times by the right people, he became what he became. The right hand and rotten through of the colonel. He knew from the start that colonels were corrupt. Moreover, Nikita helped him with this, providing the most ingenious schemes. Schemes where he, William, remains clean and innocent, while his boss will end up in jail. And for a long time. Because if William gets caught, he will definitely show, without fail, where the pig is buried. And shareholders and serious people like that are best not to mess with. But after today's conversation, William realized that the colonel would be replaced within the week. Actually, during the time while he's running around the forest searching for the money. The black money. If half of it disappears, for example, the shareholders won't be upset. And he'll have something extra to show, presenting his find and saying, "Look, who they've been taking care of." And who knows, maybe his life will improve. But if not, this money will be enough for at least 5 years without worrying. William thought as he left the building. Dave was lying in the bushes, unable to believe his eyes and ears. Thieves, he was robbed by thieves, they took his treasure from the dungeon and carried it away. He listened to their conversation, almost wanting to intervene and assert his rights. That he was a free man and could steal anything at any time, but when he saw through the bushes that both of them had guns, he knew arguing with a man who has a gun is a very bad idea. Dave licked his lips. The scum, the swindlers, robbed him, but they left something behind. When the thieves had moved a good distance away, he, like a hungry dog, quickly crawled on his belly to the backpack they had dropped and found the necessary items. First of all, despite his broken leg, Dave felt like he could move mountains. And the only reason he didn't was because of the broken leg, otherwise, he would have done it in an instant. Moreover, Dave noticed something atypical for him. He was thinking like a cannibal. Calmly, coldly, though his body was fully prepared to act immediately. Plus, Dave, without even realizing it, rummaged through the bags and managed to give himself first aid. He made a splint, tore up the backpack, wrapped his paw, and, not even looking, swallowed the pills he found. He knew that, most likely, they were painkillers, albeit weak ones, but it would work for him because he had nothing else. Plus, there was a bit of food in the backpack, a slice of bread and salted meat. 2 traps and a few other odds and ends. Matches, cigarettes, a couple of candies. Dave rummaged through and gutted the backpack like a seasoned butcher, seeing in each item an opportunity, a chance. A chance to recover what was stolen. He looked at the gaping void in the darkness, which was darker than the night. Whispers. They were calling him. Something was waiting for him there. It had always been waiting for him. He would definitely find out. But later. For now. Business. He remembered where they went. He remembered, and after tossing the backpack onto his back, eating a bit, he made himself crutches and limped in the same direction. Yes, it was uncomfortable and hurt under the armpit, yes, damn it, but it was 1,000 times faster than crawling on his belly. And he really wanted to catch up with those thieves. Dave was flying like 7 people were chasing him. At one point, he saw a white beam of a flashlight in the distance between the trees. And he realized it was them. Already confident, he followed them through the forest. He was afraid to get too close, since the men were armed and could hear him. But there was only one thing that interested him. The house they were living in. That's all he needed. How to finish them off, he would figure out later. Saying that this journey drained all his strength would be an understatement. Even the surprising stamina didn't help much. It wore off after an hour or so. Plus, since he was a bit of an invalid, he often found himself on uncomfortable ground. He fell, then, hissing like a nest of snakes, he would get up and move on. Sometimes he thought he had died, and this was his punishment for a wrong life. Always running through the forest and chasing the elusive light. With a broken leg. And what? Sounds quite fitting, he thought, until the village of about 30 yards appeared before his eyes, along with 2 bodies stumbling along the dirt road towards the village. Now, the key was not to miss the moment. He thought, realizing that if before he had been rushing through the forest overcoming obstacles, now it was more about enduring the pain, but in smaller doses of distance. He couldn't afford to miss them at this moment, especially with the money, his money, that had already cost his friend's life, if he could still call him that. So Dave gritted his teeth and persevered, like it was payday, hopping down on one leg, mentally praying to all the dark gods just so he wouldn't fall. The 2 silhouettes had no idea what evil they had pulled out of the forest. You should have listened to that guy, boy, thought Dave. You should have. How right he was. They sat there, unaware that just a meter from their window, Dave was setting a trap. And Dave was cunning and sly, because now he had to think like them, how to finish them off, since they had weapons and he didn't. Killing one was no problem, but killing 2, that was a challenge. But Dave didn't despair, he knew he couldn't fall any lower morally, and so he set the trap, not just anywhere, but directly opposite the bathroom. The second trap, he would set near the front door. And here was his plan. The first one would go out for a piss, step on the trap with his foot, scream, and howl. The second would run out with a gun and find the other trap. He would most likely run out with the gun because of the money, and everything was on edge. Dave would take the second man's gun, shoot both of them, grab the money, take something from the house, like medicine, and escape. The plan was good, the plan was laid out, but again, aside from the traps, he had nothing. And that meant he needed to think through every detail. So Dave did exactly that, lying in wait under the window, listening to their conversation. "It's a shame your mother didn't live," the older man said. "Very sad, she would've." "Ah, Dad, just think about how much we can buy with all this." "Scary, son, such money didn't just end up in the forest. We might run into problems, we should hide it." "Come on, Dad, let's go to the city tomorrow, everything will be fine." "We need to think, son, we need to think," the father replied, and Dave heard the son get up and walk towards the door. If Dave were a spectator and someone were telling him the story of how cunning he was, he wouldn't believe it for a second. But if he saw it, he'd buy himself ice cream as a reward. The trap snapped onto the son's ankle, who stepped on it in the dark, and he screamed so loudly that the dead probably woke up. Dave was already setting another trap by the door, and he'd be damned if he made a mistake. But he didn't. And what happened was what's usually called fate. The father flew into the trap, and he had a gun, just like Dave had predicted. But besides him, something else came out to hunt. When the trap clicked on the man's ankle, Dave shot his brains out. He was unexpectedly surprised to hear the second man stop screaming and make strange sounds. He thought he was having an epileptic seizure, and in general, everything was fine. But after dragging the body and tossing it off the porch, Dave saw boots that had come into the light. A pair of boots appeared for a moment, but it was enough for Dave to realize that he had witnesses. But not enough for his foolish head to give the hands the command to aim and survive the trigger. And then the same terrifying creature from the catacombs jumped on him. The very same one, or maybe it was something similar, it didn't matter. It knocked Dave to the ground, and with one strike of its right hand, it made him start mixing up left and right. Despite its gaunt body and childlike figure, one might think the creature was harmless. But in reality, it pressed on Dave so hard that smoke was coming out of his ass. The only thing he tried to do, he threw his thumbs at the creature's eyes and, of course, pressed them. Stinking blood splashed onto him. Then, Dave was thrown into the wall, where he lost all sense of direction. The creature, making some indistinct sounds, groaned and snorted, hit the door frame 7 times, and only on the 8th try, it flew out the door. Dave lay there for half a minute, begging himself not to pass out, grab his backpack, and collapse somewhere in the garden, since only about 10 seconds had passed since the shot and the scream. And people were probably running here to figure out what had happened. Groaning and trying to feel the ground with his hands, Dave was seized by a cramp and vomited bread and water with salted meat. Crawling on his hands and knees, with a dazed look, he found his backpack, grabbed it, put it on, and crawled in some direction. A direction he didn't know. For him, it was just some random place. He crawled, what seemed to him, at breakneck speed. It felt like miles were left behind. But in reality, after crawling to the gardens, he collapsed, breathing heavily and crying, hiding behind a zucchini. He was right, people really started shouting and fussing just a few minutes later. But that was a few minutes, a few sweet minutes, during which he allowed himself to cry, gather himself, and quietly whimper while creeping towards the forest. Crawling, he realized that the creature had really hurt him, and he had a concussion. He was dizzy and nauseous to the point where he threw up on himself, and now he was only suffering from cramps. His head rang as if it were made of tin, and his left eye refused to focus, with the image barely coming through. Either it was blurry, or he couldn't tell. This was Dave's last thought before he lost consciousness and stopped realizing what he was doing. He woke up, which was already a good thing. He woke up not in the basement but in the forest, which was doubly good. He felt just fine, although he remembered that the day before, he had been beaten so badly that he could hardly breathe. Whispers in his head became clearer. They weren't his whispers. He had the feeling that someone was watching him. "How nice that you woke up," said a familiar voice with William. "Oh, the boss personally came to check on my health." "How sweet," Dave said sarcastically, noting the abnormal clarity of his thoughts. "Yes, personally, to take the money, and as a tribute to the former employee, I'm ready to listen to your tirade." "Just kidding, I'm really curious to know, what did you hope for?" "To sit it out." "All right, to sit it out. Do you know how I found you?" "Well, you don't have to be a genius. We made so much noise that even a dead man would have heard us." "That's exactly it. And I have a question. What were you hoping for? And where's the second one?" "Chance." A thought flickered in Dave's head. "What's that? Where's the second one?" "They stepped on my broken leg," and Dave howled. "Dog, look at yourself. I can't even talk to you, you disgusting thing. Come on, say it already, and I'll kill you." They pressed so hard on his leg that Dave nearly pissed himself. In fact, everything that was left, and he almost passed out. But he had a hope to outsmart the bastard and finish him off right there. "I'll show you," Dave roared, begging to stop the execution. "I'll show you, but you have to draw it." "I won't show you." "He has a second backpack." "A second backpack? Isn't that all the money?" "No, not all of it. He has another one. We took different paths, we split the money. He's waiting for me." They stopped pressing on my leg. "No more tricks. There's a crowd of people crawling here. We'll find your buddy, but trust me, it's better if it's me." William took a pen and a notebook out of his pocket and threw them at Dave. "Draw, you animal." "I can't." "Come closer, I'll show you." "My fingers won't listen." William leaned over to this disgusting worm, who was dragging his lips, just to feel the pen with his eyes. Then William felt his throat being squeezed by jaws, and his Adam's apple was ripped out. He smiled for a moment, as it was so predictable, so easy. But he underestimated his enemy and paid the price. When he was walking here, he thought that Dave and Bill were so dumb that they couldn't even get through the forest without making noise or crushing someone. But he was wrong. Dave was just sitting and rummaging through the backpack, feeling rich for real. He had weapons, food, water, and the forest, with no people around, plus medicine. The only thing that scared him were the whispers and the thoughts in his head. But other than that, he was truly happy because he defended his right to be rich, defended his right to life. Yes, maybe he wasn't honest, maybe he was mean, lying, and cowardly, but did anyone say life is fair? No, of course not. But Dave was happy when he unwrapped food, took a bite, and his stomach cramped with pain. Damn it, dreams come true, but you can't digest them, he thought, and he feared what the whispers were telling him. They were telling him it was too late. Too late. And he's different now. He has changed. He spent too much time in the dungeon. He was there for too long, and now he's changed neither for better nor for worse. He just became different. The whispers told him that the food wasn't in the backpack, no, it was lying with the ripped-out Adam's apple, and that he needed to eat it, that. He really bit into the boss and noticed how delicious the raw fresh meat was. Especially now. Especially for him. The whispers said his home was those catacombs, his wealth was those long corridors, leading deep and far into the darkness. And his new friends were deep underground, in one of the ancient and